No, I think that's a serious point. I'm never sure which one people expect me to be, and very often it they conflict. Most often, as a matter of fact, with people I don't know, I'm expected to be Duke more than Thompson.
For your love, for your love.
If you type Hunter S. Thompson into the YouTube search bar, you'll be greeted by a plethora of uninformative or short videos by unenergetic YouTubers and interviewers who really fail to capture the essence of such an interesting man. His infamous hijinks as well as his famous style of gonzo journalism have all been broadly covered in the aforementioned videos, however. Yet Hunter S. Thompson's essence was still not captured. In this video, I will attempt to present the perfect video on Hunter S. Thompson. It's going to be difficult because notoriously he's a difficult man to put into words. He's a real character. But please pay close attention to the clips I'm showing you in alignment with the words I'm saying, and it will give you a better indication as to what he was really like.
Different drugs for different things. Right now, I think it's in my interest, in ours perhaps, maybe in the interest of the greater good, for me to smoke a joint and calm down.
So for the people who are unaware of the exact extent Hunter S. Thompson went to in order to distance himself from reality, his daily routine should set you straight. He began his day at 3 p.m. and by 3:05 p.m. he was drinking Chivas Regal whiskey accompanied by his obligatory Dunhill cigarettes. He allowed these to tide him over for 40 minutes before the clock struck 3:45 p.m. when he would snort some coke. The exact amount is not specified, but I cannot see him stopping at a bump. 5 minutes later he'd hit the shivers again, as well as lighting up another Dunhill or two. He then would allow 15 minutes to pass before indulging himself with a typical Scottish breakfast of a cup of coffee as well as another Dunhill. 10 minutes later at 4:15 p.m, probably after realising that the coffee wasn't working, another bump or two was on the menu, followed by a 1 minute interval before Hunter S. Thompson would drink some orange juice and smoke a Dunhill. 4:30 p.m. would be the next snort of blow, shortly followed 24 minutes later by another blast or two of coke. 11 minutes later at 5:05 p.m, more coke, and at 5:11 more coffee and a few Dunhills. Thompson would only wait 19 minutes before having some more shivers with ice, and later he'd have more coke and etc, etc, which I can only assume to mean more whiskey/cigarettes. At 6 p.m. he would switch up to the weed to, and I quote, take the edge off the day, which so far hasn't appeared to be too stressful on anything except the liver, brain and lungs, among other vital organs that were being hindered by this mix of recreational substances and orange juice. He now waits an hour and 5 before heading to the Woody Creek Tavern, where he indulges in a Heineken, a couple margaritas, coleslaw, a taco salad, a double order of fried onion rings, carrot cake, ice cream, a bean fritter, Dunhills, more Heineken, Coke, not the beverage, and to tide him over until he gets home, he'd take home what he called a snow cone. I don't know if that's an actual beverage that's known by loads of people, but basically what it is 3 to 4 fingers of Chivas whiskey as well as ice. I can't see that being a typical drink ordered in many bars up and down the country. It does seem pretty alcoholic, but there you go. And then at 9 p.m, I presume Hunter is probably feeling lethargic, so he starts snorting coke more seriously, and that's a quote from him himself. Whatever the fuck that's meant to mean, he's snorted so much already, I don't know what seriously is. And 10 p.m. means it's time to drop acid, which I can only imagine is an awful trip with the police evidence locker cocktail he's got brewing inside him. An hour later, Thompson puts down the shivers and picks up the chartreuse, which is a liqueur, followed by more coke and cannabis. Half an hour later, Hunter does a few lines, etc, which we can only assume is cigarettes and whiskey. And at midnight he is ready to write, which he does for 6 hours, in which time he consumes chartreuse, coke, marijuana, shivers, coffee, Heineken, clove cigarettes, grapefruit, Dunhills, orange juice and gin, which is all accompanied by a symphony of pornography playing in the background. At 6 AM, he gets in the hot tub and eats fettuccine alfredo and Dove bars, which are chocolates, not soap. We don't have Dove bars over here in the UK, I think we call them Galaxy. At 8 AM, Thompson takes the sleeping pill triazolam, aka Halcyon, and at 8:20 AM, he passes out for the day. I would say for the night, but it's 8:20 AM when most people are getting up to go to work or already at work. Now, before I go on, I must add that this routine was only based on a solitary day biographer E. Jean Carroll transcribed in her biography on Hunter S. Thompson in late 2011, so it should be taken with a pinch of saxa. However, it gives us an indication into a typical day in Woody Creek, Colorado with the journalist. Infer from this what you will, but it fascinates me. I don't understand how somebody can convey such an unlimited level of charisma whilst in Thompson's words being so twisted on drugs. This is the precise reasoning amongst a few other things behind him being such a character. His body acts in total degeneracy, compulsively consuming drugs, but despite this, his juxtaposed mind flows healthily, and he constructs elaborate works that many wish they had the peace of mind to put onto paper. And this attitude towards living and exploring the mind on drugs is a huge part of his most iconic article and story to date.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
Now, for the typical Hunter S. Thompson fan like myself, the words fear and loathing have both taken on new meaning in your world. Typically, they indicate some sort of anguish or disdain towards a certain noun that you come into contact with while you're out in the field. However, a Thompson fan will automatically recognize these words as 50% of the famous 1971 novel and article Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Most attempt to get by on the knowledge provided in the 1998 screen adaptation starring Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro, which is quite good and is quite accurate. However, after both listening to and reading the book a few times, I found the film only scratches the surface of actual events, and without spoiling anything, I highly encourage anyone watching to do the same to broaden their understanding of the exact events that took place. Not much more can be said in regards to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Instead, I would like to go into more detail about his other Fear and Loathing piece of work. Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 1972 or 72 is Thompson's novel that detail the events surrounding Richard Nixon's re-election in 1972. A lot of people don't know the exact extent Thompson went to submerge himself in politics. In fact, he ran for local sheriff in Aspen, Colorado in 1970. He wrote an article detailing his running for sheriff called The Battle of Aspen. I must add, Thompson's political endeavours are another fascination of mine. Not many people crippled by drug addiction follow through on the empty utopian idea they have for society. But the exception to most rules surrounding addiction, Hunter S. Thompson was very active in his pursuit for political power so he could enforce rules like travel around Aspen solely being under the confinements of bicycle and foot. Nowadays, this sort of pledge would, without a doubt, draw some form of a parallel to climate change, but this feels like one of those things that Thompson would just do to generally improve the aesthetic as he strolls along with his iconic walk on full show with a cigarette in his mouth. What I found most interesting about this pledge is the insistence on these rules being enforced by the police, which in my mind goes against Thompson's whole ethos against an authoritarian society where things like drugs are controlled by the state. It goes without saying that this pledge, amongst others, such as the abolition of city streets with jackhammers, were both key factors in Thompson's running for sheriff, resulting in failure. That being said, it wasn't by a huge margin. He had 174 votes off the top of my head, and he only lost by 201 to 201 votes, I think. I'll look that up and put it in the video. But I found this to be quite a shame, as to a certain extent, I think he could have been a good sheriff. His demeanour and ability to hold conversation would have worked to his advantage whilst verbally jousting amongst other politicians. Despite this, however, his lack of traditional 9-to-5 work ethic might have proved me wrong, as it probably helps to get up early and get a good night's sleep when attempting to better a small community, because I imagine a functional, active brain as well as a healthy body are both key for making potentially life-altering decisions for a few thousand people. This is ignoring the mix of drugs Thompson used daily that could have potentially been impairing the function of his brain in ways that are unforeseen, which probably hindered his decision-making ability considerably. So in conclusion, it was probably for the best he remained a character/journalist rather than a politician. But for the record, the people of Aspen, when interviewed, they said it was nice to see somebody really coming up with policies and pledges that were different, but at least he was saying something. I remember a woman saying, well, at least he's doing something and he's trying to change things around here and all of that sort of stuff. So I have always been of the opinion that people like celebrities like Donald Trump and in this case Hunter S. Thompson, it's quite interesting when they go into politics because they're not as easily controlled and who knows what could happen. You know, they have some bright ideas for the future. However, in this case, it's probably not for the best. After losing the battle for Aspen, Hunter decided that politics wasn't for him and he was just going to stick to what he was, good at, which was writing and creating amazing pieces of gonzo journalism. I think maybe if he refined his points a bit more and really pushed himself in politics, he probably could have got elected as sheriff, but that's just a theory.
It's not Bush so much. Bush is hard to get your hands on. He's not really there. And I beat him and
Whilst we're on the subject of drugs and their correlation with impaired brain function, I want to touch on alcohol and Thompson's relationship with it, which could have potentially led to his degeneration and demise. Now, after the life Thompson led, it's easy to say the abundance of drugs is what killed him. But in a way, alcohol killed the Hunter we knew and loved, the articulate scholar and gonzo extraordinaire. After watching a few interviews featuring Hunter as a young man and a few of him in his 40s, it's a stark contrast with him as he grew into his older and later years. As he got older, he was less and less capable of articulating himself and expressing his feelings. This was because of the drink, not only in the way that it made him slur his speech, but it also halted his brain function and his ability to speak his mind. And his ability to speak his mind, no matter the subject, is another factor that set him apart from other journalists. Alcohol is also a depressant, which could have also contributed to the journalist's physical death. The quoted title is a famous line from Thompson. I believe it's describing the notorious red shark in Fear and Loathing. I find it ironic because of the double meaning of speed. Speed as in how fast you're going, and speed as in amphetamine. Ironically, drugs played a part in his death, which doesn't come to the surprise of many, and it was his attitude towards the thrill of drugs that overtly demonstrated his lack of appreciation for the possibility of death. Thompson had openly talked about killing himself for a year outside of his suicide in 2008. His fast lifestyle had caught his body like a predator to prey, and it was feasting on its catch. After arguing with his wife the night before, Thompson tried to patch things up with her in the morning. This led to another argument which resulted in his wife storming out to the gym, and when she returned her husband was not there. Instead, his corpse, the vessel for his soul and mind, was lying there in a pool of blood. The purest breathing form of gonzo journalism had halted its existence after a fight with its physical and mental health.
I was asking you whether there's this pressure to live up to the image that you've created.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, you've been putting it on me all week. Well, how much pressure do you think how would you define pressure?
So, in conclusion, Hunter S. Thompson was everything you were told not to be as a child. He was a drunk, a drug addict, some would say he was too political, and a closeted depressant with a pulse. Yet, he pulled it off. His wife proclaimed his ability to work hard on his writing in his final 24 hours documentary. She said he always wanted to make every word he wrote cut through to your soul and fit perfectly in the sentence. He often edited things multiple times to comply with this. He's been described as a genius, a scholar, a journalist, an extraordinaire, amazing, fascinating, interesting, and a character, and that's only in this video. But there is no word to draw close to this man and who he was. well and truly, in every sense, one of a kind. He may have only been mortal like me and you, but the productions of his mind will live on forever.